Let's get ready to rumble!
All right. It's tough to follow up that kind of cute, you know what I'm saying? Man, what a beautiful little lady. If we've never met, my name's TJ, and I'm the pastor here at the Shore Church. And we are in week number 3 of a series called Fight Night. And Fight Night is all about relationships, because sometimes in relationships, you fight. But did you know you can fight and the relationship can get better after the fight is over? And that's what this series has been about. And so week number 1, if you missed it, my wife Leah and I were up here and we talked about how our family kind of works and how we kind of have some things that we understand. And if you missed that, you can pick it up on the podcast or YouTube or even Facebook. You can pick it up there. Last week, I talked about you are 50% of every relationship you have, right? You're one half of it. And you can't control their half. You can only control yours. So I talked about being growing personally, your own personal growth, and how God defines you, and finding your identity in Christ Jesus, and how that will change every relationship. Now this week what I want to do is I want to take it kind of a step further, and I'm going to talk about some, let's just call it, rules of engagement. Because at some point you're going to have a fight, and I want to give you some ground rules that will make sure that that fight is fair, and it stays within the guidelines of a healthy relationship. All right? You guys ready for this? All right, let me pray over you, and then we're going to get into what it's all about. Father, thank you so much. Thank you for the joy that you've given us through your son, Jesus, through the grace that we've been made new in you. So today we open up our hearts, and we want to receive from you, God. We want to receive all that you have, so bring it on this morning. In your name we pray. Everybody says? Amen. All right, so there's one thought that I want to give you on relationships. And it's not the thought that comes from a movie with Tom Cruise in it. You guys ever see the movie Jerry Maguire? And there's one line in there that from the inception of that movie has absolutely plagued relationships. Do you guys know what the line is? You complete me. Oh, it sounds beautiful. It sounds like, wow, that's the goal right there, that I'm an incomplete person until I find the person that completes me. It sounds cool, but nothing could be further from the truth. It is an absolute and total lie. There's not a person on the planet that can complete you. Did you know that? You guys are going, but I really like my spouse. I'm not doubting that you like your spouse, but I'm telling you right now, they didn't complete you. And the longer you're married, the more you realize, they didn't complete me. Anybody? No? Nobody? Okay. Because how in our mind did we decide that I'm going to take my whole life, the good, the bad, the ugly, my dysfunction, my habits, my quirks, my idiosyncrasies, and then I'm going to take all of that and I'm going to combine it with another person, with all of their habits and their goods and their bads and their uglies, and their insecurities and their idiosyncrasies and their habits, the things that drive other people nuts, and we're going to take these two lives and we're going to put them together, and it's going to be perfect. Did that work? No. There's conflict. You complete me. It's a romantic thing to say, but it's absolutely and completely not true. So today, what I want to do is I want to talk about the times where we come to the realization it wasn't true. that they are driving me crazy. And it doesn't have to be a marriage relationship. It doesn't have to be dating. Because I know you've got family members that are driving you crazy. And I know you've got friends or former friends that are driving you crazy. You got some coworkers you feel like you can't get away from. In that relationship, you're like, you are not completing me, man. This is not working. We have those conflicts. But in order for us to fight and win for the relationship, we have to come to one conclusion, and it's this. You have to want the relationship to be right more than you want to be right. Have you ever been in an argument and you were right, and you made sure that they knew you were right, and you boxed them in that corner and told them how right you were, but at the end, you lost? Because you can be right and you can be wrong at the same time. Because sometimes when you're right and you fight, sometimes you lose the relationship. You ever been there? Now, in our context this morning, we have to come to the one conclusion that says, I want the relationship to be right more than I want to be right. It's not about a personal thing. It's not like what I want in this. It's what's best for us. And if what's best for us is at the primary center of it all, that relationship's going to be better. But when we put in the center of it what I want to have and what I want to see happen and what my expectations are, you can win that fight, but you will lose that relationship. And that's true in every relationship we have. Doesn't matter if it's a coworker or if it's your spouse or anyone in between. We can be right and we can lose at the same time. So what I want to do today is I want to talk about how these conflicts kind of work and some rules that can help us stay out of trouble in conflict with the people around us. So here's the four kind of steps of conflict. Let me explain them to you real quick. The first one is this, withdrawal. Have you ever had like a conflict with someone and your initial reaction is to just kind of go, all right, I'm going to go over here for a while, right? You just did you just want to avoid it a little bit. Maybe it's a physical withdrawal, like you leave the room. Sometimes you slam the door, but you usually leave the room, right? Or if you're on the phone, what do? You hang up. And hanging up on someone is nowhere near as fun as it used to be. Right now, you just push the button really hard. It used to be you could slam that sucker down a couple times, right? Ka-cling, ka-cling, ka-cling. My kids will never know the joy of hanging up on someone like that. It's just like, beep, it's done. It's so not satisfactory. It doesn't satisfy at all, right? We have this withdrawal, and sometimes it's not physical, sometimes it's emotional. We turn off our heart to that person. You may be in proximity, but you just kind of go, whoop, I'm not letting you in anymore. That's the first thing that occurs. In a conflict, it's just kind of like, I don't want to be around this right now. I'm uncomfortable. And most people are not itching for conflict, are they? Most people are trying to avoid it, and so they just run away. They withdraw from it. Maybe it's emotionally, maybe it's physically. The second thing that happens is it escalates. So maybe you're still in proximity to that person, and you kind of get like Popeye. I can't stand it no more. You know what I'm saying? That's all I can stand. I can't stand it no more. You just, okay, we're doing this. I've been trying to avoid it. I left the room. I hung up the phone. I've cut you off from my heart, but you are still annoying, and I still can't stand you. So the problem gets bigger and bigger. You have the escalating fight. And when you have an escalating fight, you quit asking questions and you start speaking in absolutes. You guys know what I'm talking about? You're not saying, hey, how can we make this relationship better? You're not saying that. You're saying, you always do this. You're never blah, 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 right? You just start making declarations. But the problem is, always and never are escalating vocabulary. Did you know that? Like, you can't say always or never and have it actually be true in your relationship. Did you know? Like, you can't. You always say that. Literally, they say that every single time they open their mouth. No, you never do this. Really? Because at one point they probably did do that, and now you're mad because they're not doing it, right? So it's not true that it's never, but when we get angry, we use the escalating words. And we stop asking questions and we start making statements and we start making demands, right? And after that, it goes to the third one, belittling. And this is where the real permanent damage starts to come in. We usually, if you're in a conflict with someone, you're in close enough relationship with them, you know them well enough to pull out the big guns. In 1996, you did this. We begin to show them who they were at their lowest moment of life, at their weakest, at their most sinful, and we pull that back out and we go, boom, that's who you are. If you know that person, right? And the pain from the past comes into the current conflict, and it begins to sink that knife a little deeper in the relationship. And it hurts, and there's pain there. And then finally, number 4, the fourth thing we believe is we get to false beliefs. Like once we get through withdrawal, escalation, the belittling, then we come to conclusions that aren't really true. We come to the conclusion that people are supposed to complete me, and well, they're just not completing me anymore. I used to love them, but I don't love them anymore. I've fallen out of love. I fell into love, now I'm falling out. Like you can just fall into it like a pool, right? Like you're like, whoa, there it is, right? No, you come to this false conclusion. It's just not working anymore. My mother was right. I never should have married that guy. My buddies were right. She's controlling. And you come to these false conclusions that it just cannot be undone. This relationship can never be redeemed. It can never be fixed. I'm just a different person than they are. I'm not the person they used to be. They're not the person they used to be. And we take God out of the equation completely. Have you guys ever seen these 4 steps in play in your relationships before? You don't have to say yes. You probably shouldn't even look at anybody right now. No, right, dear? Right? Okay. But we do these things. We withdraw. And sometimes the withdrawal takes years. It's just a steady, slow decline. And the escalation occurs in small spurts and pieces over years or even decades. And the belittling, the false beliefs begin to come in. But what I want to do today is I want to put a timeout on all of these. And at each one of these 4 levels, give you a tool or something you can do, a rule you can follow that kind of stops the step in its tracks. Is that cool with you guys? I want to get really, really practical today. So we're going to go and we're going to talk about these 4 things, but in a different way. We're going to try and stop these 4 things from happening, all right? The first one is this. Number 1 is you got to deal with the problem in one day. You may be going, well, TJ, I'm kind of in that withdrawal stage with someone right now. It's been difficult. It's been hard. We've been distanced from one another. You've got to deal with it. You've got to deal with the problem in one day. I don't know about you. I'm typically not offended very easily. But when I am offended, oh, it's a big deal. Anybody else like I can be offended for years, decades if I want to. I mean, I can hold on to stuff. Anybody else? Like you're dead to me. That's kind of like where it's like, I don't need you anymore. I'm my own man. You know what I'm saying? Like I can hold on to some stuff. But the Bible tells us, you shouldn't do that. Now, my primary defense is don't get offended, right? But my secondary thing is, if I do get offended, we got to do something about it. And we can't just sit on it and wait and see how it plays out. No, we got to have that conversation. We got to talk about it. We got to be honest, and we got to stop the withdrawal before it gets too far. Because the longer you wait in the distance, the harder it is to get back together. Catch it while it's quick. Don't let the withdrawal continue to grow in margin and gap. Catch it while it's still small, while it's something that's more easily redeemed. You know what I'm saying? Look what it says in the book of Ephesians chapter 4. In your anger, don't sin. Do not let the sun go down while you're still angry. So there's a timeline on this, right? I don't know if he literally means like sundown. Like you had a fight at 5:45 and sundown is at 6:18 and you're going, oh my gosh, I've got 33 minutes to work this out? Or does he mean do it quickly, right? Like maybe there's a 24-hour rule that you just got to do something about it, right? Because you've got to go in. Do you want to do it? No, that's the person that made you angry. That's the person that hurt you or offended you, right? But how do you deal with it? You got to deal with it right away because it's only going to get worse the longer it sits. The unforgiveness begins to seat in your heart. The distance between you begins to grow. So he says you got to deal with it right away. Paul's writing to this church in Ephesus, hey, when you're offended, deal with it right away and don't give the devil a foothold. Because when you don't deal with it right away, what happens? The enemy's like, oh, there's some room in there to mess them up. There's some distance in there where I can interject a little bit and I can start whispering lies. Yeah, your mom was right. Yeah, he's never going to change. Yeah, they're just a jerk. They were born that way. They're never going to be different. And the whispers start to come in and you begin to believe the lies. You've got to deal with it quickly. Because if you don't deal with it quickly, the distance grows and the enemy whispers. And the foothold comes into our lives. The second thing, so you might be going, okay, withdrawal, that's good, TJ. I'm past that step. We've already hit the escalation part. What do I do with escalation now? Anybody, you don't have to raise your hand, but anybody else, you kind of in that moment, you're like, okay, what do I do with this next part? Okay, here's how you stop, or here's how you de-escalate what's going on in that relationship, okay? Here's my rule. Remove you always and you never from the fight. You always and you never. Because again, these are declarative statements. You are assuming absolutes. And I don't know about you, I hate it when someone assumes an absolute about me. They just assume to know who I am in a fight, and they assume to know that I'm not a good person, or I've done the wrong thing, or that I'm always wrong and I'm never right? Like that assuming makes me even more mad. And what do I want to do? I want to assume back. You always say that. You always assume about me. Anybody else ever been there before? So what we need to do is we need to remove these escalating statements from the way we interact with each other. We need to remove it from the way we parent our children. Remove it from our workplaces and our language. And even if they go there, do you have to go there? Even if they really are just escalating and they're making it worse, do you have to follow them? If you follow them, you're letting them lead the relationship instead of you leading the relationship. Don't go there. Don't do that. The book of Proverbs says this in chapter 18. It says, spouting off before listening to the facts is both shameful and foolish. I don't know about you. I don't want to be shameful, and I don't want to be foolish. But how many times in an argument have you ever been shameful and foolish? I've been there. I've said the thing that I didn't mean to say, I didn't want to say. I made assumptions, but we do that. But the book of Proverbs, the book of wisdom is like, hey, listen, when you start having conflict, when you're kind of, your blood's boiling a little bit, don't assume just anything. Don't say just anything. What you should do is stop the escalating statements. Don't just spout off, but listen. How fast would an argument be diffused if we, instead of saying, you always do this, you never do that, you said, hey, how can we make this relationship better? Would it turn a corner real fast? Hey, how can I understand better what you're feeling? Hey, how can I help your heart heal in this situation? What if we went into every relationship not assuming something about them and trying to get our point across, and instead tried to understand them before we ourselves were understood by them? Do you know how quick your relationships would change? You know how quickly conflict would go away if you just said, hey, share your heart. I mean, you'll probably assume something, you'll probably get angry, but I'm not going to follow you there. I'm going to do the right thing. I'm going to ask the questions. How can we make this relationship win? Because remember, what's our first thought? I can be right and lose the relationship, right? I can be right in the fight, but I can be wrong in the relationship. Our first thought is we want the relationship to be right more than we want to be right. So the questions that we ask will lead us into that health and healing. Hey, how can we make this better? You guys understand that? Let's fight right. And when you do that, your relationship is actually taking giant steps forward. And when you do it the other way, they're taking giant steps backward. Isn't it amazing to think that God designs us and gives us this advice in such a way that you can get really, really angry at someone and have the relationship come out better for it? That's incredible. That's not, the world will tell you, you have to avoid conflict because conflict will only ever tear it down. But I'm telling you right now, the right kind of conflict and the right kind of response with God in the middle of it will make your relationship better at the end of it. All right, you may be going, okay, withdraw, past it, thanks for the advice, we're gone, all right? Escalation, that's great words, wish I would have known it last week. Okay, we're past that. I'm on to step 3, TJ, and I need a little bit of help because the belittling, the garbage throwing from the past has come back in, and so what do I do in those moments? Well, number 3, if you're gonna fight with someone, don't say the thing that wins the fight. You guys, if you've been in relationships with someone long enough, you know the thing. Am I right? You know that person well enough to know what they're good at, what they're not good at. You know what their strengths are, and you know what they struggle with. And if you start to bring up everything else and put it into this conflict will never be resolved. Because you can't solve what happened 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. You can only forgive that. That's the only way it's going to go away. But if you keep bringing it back in and you keep trying to pull it back in, you're going to break the relationship. It's just going to be broken apart. And you may be going, well, TJ, but what if the conflict is about that thing? Well, then deal with that thing and none of the other things. Does that make sense? Let's talk about one thing at a time. Let's fight it one thing at a time. Because when we solve that one thing, we're a step closer to having a healthier relationship. Do the one thing at one time. But here's another thing I want to share with you. It comes from the book of Ephesians chapter 4. Even if it's true, it doesn't mean that you have to say it. Because there's another filter. You may be going, but TJ, everything I say is true. Yeah, but that's not the only thing, the only filter. Truth is not the only filter on what we say. There's another filter, and look at this. Don't let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, and here's the other filter, but only what is helpful for building others up according to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen. So when you're in a conflict, something may be true, but it might not be beneficial. You guys get that? You may be going, yeah, but they really did do that thing. They really did say that or go there or do whatever to me. Yeah, but if you bring that into the conversation, is it going to benefit the relationship? Is it going to heal what's going on right now? So there's 2 things you need to ask yourself. Is it true? Also, is it beneficial? Is it going to help this conversation move forward? Is it going to help our relationship take a step forward? If it isn't, maybe you need to leave it for another day. Maybe you need to talk about that thing when both of you are kind of calm and not already excited and escalated, right? Maybe we need to table that one for later. And when the 2 of you get on the same page with this, it'll absolutely change everything. Because my wife and I, we never fight. We have disagreements. We have discussions. Whoa, we never fight. I'm just kidding. We fight all the time. That sounds bad. We don't fight all the time. We have discussions all the time. All right. But here's this rule right here, the belittling, the thing that wins the fight, that's what really hurts a marriage. And when we get into conflict, I know she's not going to drop that trump card on me, and I'm not going to drop it on her. And when we have an interaction, when we leave that conversation of conflict, she never has to wonder, does he really love me? When I walk away, I never wonder, does she even like me anymore? Because we're not out for blood. We're not out to hurt. We're out to heal the relationship. And in order to show that we're out to heal the relationship, we're going to leave unwholesome talk off the table. We're gonna leave that thing that will end the fight, that'll get them so mad that they slam the door and walk away. We're not gonna go there. We're not gonna do that. We're not gonna say it. Because when we do that, the withdrawal starts all over again, doesn't it? And so now there's so much security in our relationship because she always knows that I'm not going anywhere, that I love her, that I'm not gonna go there. I'm not out to hurt her. And I know that she's not out to hurt me. That when we have conflict, we're fighting forward instead of fighting backward. There's so much peace there. Even in the midst of conflict, there's so much peace there. And then number 4, the fourth thing, is never give up. See, the fourth step in the conflict is false beliefs. Belief that it'll never change, that person will always be that way, that things can never get better than they are right now. But I'm telling you, that kind of attitude, that kind of mentality eliminates God from the equation, doesn't it? It's like we just said to God, hey, this relationship's over and there's nothing you can do about it. Do you really believe there's nothing God can do about it? Do you really believe that the creator of heaven and earth cannot do anything at all, that he's absolutely powerless in this? That's not true. It's absolutely not true. The God of the creator of all things can work. And I've seen it time and time again, even in our own church. There's people that have walked in the doors of our church, separated, divorced. They've had broken relationships time and time again. But you know what? When they walk in, they get the presence of God. They hear God's word. They start to put it into practice in their life. And the person that they were estranged from, separated from, begins to see just a small little difference in them. And they get a little curious. What is this thing? What is this God? What is happening in your life? And you know what happens? They get interested in God too. And then God begins to work in their heart, and they begins to work in the relationship, and they begin to learn that wow, God is the one that changes me. He's done the same thing in them. Perhaps there's something he can do with us. Never give up. Never stop praying. Never stop seeking God, his wisdom and his understanding in all of this. Because I got a truth for you guys. They're not the enemy. That person, they're not your enemy. They're not fighting against you. Your spouse, not the enemy. Family members, co-workers, that person that's under your skin, not the enemy. I'm telling you, the book of Ephesians chapter 6 tells us who the enemy is. Let's read it together. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood. They aren't the problem. You guys get that, right? It's not them. It's not your spouse. It's not that person. It's not them. But against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. Your battle, your enemy, is not a physical person. There's a spiritual battle going on. And what you're facing is more likely spiritual than it is physical. What's going on in your life right now is a spiritual thing, more so than it is a physical thing. You might be going, but TJ, they yelled at me, but TJ, they did this thing. Yeah, because the enemy is getting under their skin and messing with them. And now he's messing with you too. You guys get that? That's why we go back to step 1, deal with it in 24 hours. Because if we don't deal with it in 24 hours, the enemy goes, I've got some room in there, and I'm gonna mess them up. What you're facing is spiritual. Now, this passage of scripture in Ephesians chapter 6 is typically not a relationship passage. But I wanted to put it in this context so you could kind of see that everything we face is spiritual. There's a spiritual element to all of it. All of it. And I love how this passage reads in the Message version of the Bible. Now, the Message is not like a literal translation from the original language, but it's a guy named Eugene Peterson. It's his interpretation, kind of his modernization of it. And I think the language he uses is just beautiful. So I wanted to read it for you here. And it says this in verses 10, 11, and 12. And that about wraps it up. God is strong. and he wants you strong. Your relationships, God is stronger than anything that's happening, and he wants you strong as well. You guys get that? He wants you there. So take everything the master has set out for you, well-made weapons, the best materials, like some of the tools and ideas and rules that I've given you today, put them into practice and put them to use so that you'll be able to stand up to everything the devil throws your way. You get to stand up to it. You don't have to be satisfied with the brokenness of a relationship. You don't have to be saying it's just the way it is, it's never gonna change. You can actually fight back. You can have hope. He's strong, he wants you strong. Your relationships can be better. They can be strong. He's given you the tools that you need, and you will be able to stand up to everything the enemy throws at you. It's possible. But it doesn't stop there. Check it out. The verse continues. This is no afternoon athletic contest. This is not a football game. It's going to end in 4 quarters, right? This is not a baseball game that will never ever actually end, right? It's going to keep. It's not an afternoon athletic contest where everybody gets a ribbon and they go home. No. Look at this. It says, and we're going to forget about it in a couple hours. This is for keeps. Your relationships. They're for keeps, aren't they? They're worth fighting for. They're worth hanging on to. A life or death fight to the finish against who? Your spouse, right? That's the one. She's bad. He's bad. Your coworkers or your family members, right? Man, we're going to fight them till the day we die. Is that what it says? No. This is a life or death fight to the finish with the devil and all his angels. What you're doing is you're fighting with the weapons that God has given you. You're fighting the right fight, not getting distracted by everything else. Because I'm telling you right now that what you're facing is more spiritual than anything else. God is strong, and he wants you strong too. He wants that in you. He wants that strength in you. That's only possible if you are in him. You guys get that? You don't get to live and walk and act with God's strength if you don't know God. You don't get to have the well-made weapons to fight in the warfare, to have the peace and the joy and the calm that God gives in all their relationships. You don't get to have that unless you're in him. So this morning, here's what I'd like to do. I'd like to take a moment where we just kind of quietly and calmly reflect on what God has for us this morning. We're going to have a real quiet moment where you get to ask God, what from this message was for me? And for many of you, it's going to be one of the 4 steps. Deal with it in 24 hours, or don't use those escalating statements, or never give up, or whatever it is. There's something in there for you. But for all of us, I know there's a step closer to God that we can take, don't you think? And for some of us, it's the first time that we'll ever do that. We walked in here not really knowing God, but today you've felt it in your heart. I need to really know him. I need to have a relationship with him. I realize that what I'm facing is spiritual. It's not just a physical thing. There's something spiritual going on that I need him. I need to know him. So would you guys do me a favor? Maybe close your eyes, bow your heads. We're going to pray. No one moving around, no noises. Whatever you need to pray this morning, pray. But if you're here this morning and you've never committed your life to God, you never said, I'm all yours, this is your morning to do it. Don't wait. Don't stop. He's strong. He wants you strong. This morning you could pray a prayer like this. God, I'm all yours. I've been living life on my own apart from you. And I ask you now, will you forgive me? Forgive me my sin. Forgive me that distance. Today, everything I am is yours. Give me new life, new hope. You're strong, and I want to be strong too. Thank you, God. In your name we pray. Everybody says, amen. Come on, put your hands together. People pray that prayer. Thank you so much for joining us online today. If you prayed that prayer with us, we would like to help you on your spiritual journey. If you don't mind going to theshorechurch.com or emailing us at hello@theshortchurch.com. We can send you some information to start this spiritual journey of faith. And of course, we'd always love to see you in person at the Short Church, 3375 Fruitvale Road.